Praise be to Jesus. Hello again, everyone. Charles with you here. Well, as you can see by the name of what I'm going to talk about here for a few minutes, um, a belief cannot contradict itself. Now, many of you have run across people, and you probably will in the future, who will argue the point that changes that the Pope are making don't really contradict official Catholic teaching, that they're a reasonable development or they're an expansion. And, all of this is a bunch of baloney, really. The bottom line here is that, well, let me talk about this for a few minutes. A belief cannot contradict itself. In other words, in terms of what we're talking about here, you can't have a belief prior to the papacy of Pope Francis that says that remarriage is adultery, all right, and it's not allowed. I mean, unless the person, gets an annulment, or the other example would be if they would live as brother and sister. But for all practical purposes here, um, the official teaching of the Catholic Church on the books is that people who are remarried cannot receive communion because they can't go to confession, because in confession you make at the end of confession you say a prayer, and that part of that prayer is that that you will do your best not to sin again, to not to repeat this sin. And unless the person has a firm amendment to do this, I mean, Christ does not forgive your sin unless you actually, in between confessions are trying to make progress. In other words, struggling with your sin. So, regardless of how um, a person gets to the point where they believe that there is a way for remarried people to receive communion, whatever kind of word gymnastics they want to use, or whatever kind of rationalizations or whatever. Um, that's, it makes absolutely no sense at all. Because the bottom line is that a belief cannot contradict itself, all right? So the next time you run into someone who's trying to argue that, you know, oh, this is really in line with Catholic teaching. It's not. Catholic teaching says that remarried, people who are remarried cannot receive communion, all right? And in practice, what's happening, we're just going to use this example. It's happening in other areas like homosexual relationships. People are receiving communion there. People who live together, who are basically living in fornication, are receiving communion. And but we're just going to talk about the remarried, all right? Just using that as an example. So you can't have official Catholic teaching saying one thing and then in practice do something else. It's a contradiction. In other words, these two beliefs cannot coexist together in the Catholic Church. It's just impossible. Anybody who knows anything about philosophy, and I really don't, I have a technical background from college, so, but, God has taught me this much about this. You know, this is the bottom line, is that a belief system cannot contradict itself because it's two different belief systems. Once a belief is changed, even in the slightest way, shape, or form, it is no longer true to the original belief. It's as simple as that. Now, you know, when you in the future get into a discussion with someone, you need to explain to them, that, regardless of how you get there, it's immaterial. It doesn't really matter how you get from believing that, communion for the remarried is okay, and that Pope Francis is right, and of course, what he's actually doing is this is what's called situation ethics and relativity, modernism. It has a lot of different names. But, if you could just think about what I'm saying here for a while and just, instead of getting caught up with someone and defending uh, the, the official teaching, you know, just forget about that part of it. I would suggest, because you're going to get caught up in, you're going to get what you're going to get caught up in is what's not important. Okay, what's important is the bottom line: is that a belief cannot contradict itself, and if it does, it's a separate belief. All right, so and then from there you can go on to the fact that there are those baptized Catholics that believe in official Catholic teaching, and there are those baptized Catholics who believe in communion for the remarried. All right, so these are two different churches, is what they are. I mean, we all, we coexist on Sunday together, but really, in the heart and the mind of God, these are two very different churches. This gets to prophecy where, at this point in time, there's a lot of prophecy over centuries that talk about the two churches, one of them being a false church, the other one a true church. And, the bottom line in your discussion is that, you need to make it a point to explain to people that these two beliefs cannot coexist and that it's up to them to choose which belief they believe in. All right. And that's going to put them on one side of the fence or the other side of the fence. One side of the fence is on the wrong side, and the other side's on the right side. But talking about which is the right side of the fence, I mean, you can do that with a person, but not until they recognize that there are two separate belief systems here, and that we're all going to be forced, I believe, in a very public and very structured sort of way to choose which belief system we believe in. I do think this oath of, I forget what it's called exactly, but I think eventually, all this is going to come to a head. I don't think Jesus is just going to leave all this alone, and all the clergy are going to have to choose which side of the fence that they're on. And I think Pope Francis is going to force this to happen at some point. And it could be today, tomorrow, next month, a year from now. But, I mean, this really can't go on forever because these are, the conflict within the church is just too much. And, something's got to give here. So whether whether you want to talk about with a person, which side of the fence that they're on, well, I mean that's up to them. You can educate them as best you can, but I think the main thing is to help people realize that these are two different belief systems, even just based on the remarriage. That's why there are 30,000 different denominations of Christianity, non-Catholic Christianity. Because, if someone else comes along and says, all right, he's going to take, you know, um, Orthodox Lutheranism, and he's going to make, one change to it, and that starts a whole nother church, you see. That's why there are so many, 30,000 or thereabouts 30,000. Um, so, now there are, quote unquote, two Catholic churches. One is a fake church, the other one's the true church. And if you can help people realize that, that there are two different churches in the mind and heart of God, all right, and that they need to see it as such. In other words, you need to help them stop thinking like we can all coexist under one belief system, because we can't. They're just separate. They're different. They're two different churches. So that's what I'm trying to get across to you, is to stay focused in the conversation on the bottom line. The bottom line is, again, these are different belief systems. Regardless of who wants to say what about it, that's the bottom line. All right. So, boy, I was going to talk for 5 minutes. Now I'm over 11 minutes already. Okay, well, I hope I get my point across, and I hope you think about this a little bit. And, you know, in your conversation, or if you're online and get into a conversation about this, whether you do it in person or online or however, I hope you can like store this information away in your head, and use it to help the person recognize that these belief systems are two separate churches. All right. So enjoy your day, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.